Here we are. And we wanted to put together a panel for you with broad perspective and synergies that we've already been able to create. So I have three of our partners here that we have actually been gathering information from and probing their experiences and participating in different ways. So immediately close to me, we have Clint Vince. Clint Vince is a partner. He is the head of the U.S. energy practice and the co-chair of the global practice on energy for Dentons. Dentons is the largest law firm in the world now. They have been on a mission. And they have a practice that is law, but they have a strategic practice of consultation and advisory work. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with him. And then I have the distinguished Jason Williams here. Jason has been a part of the New Orleans, and can I say Nolans? Can I say that? The Nolans City Council and the president of the council with an absolute focus on smart cities. And what's interesting about the city of New Orleans and San Antonio, we actually have the same anniversary. We're both now 301 years old, and we got connected through Clint. We actually sit on the think tank that Clint has and through Dentons on smart cities, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I visited your fair city, great food. That's the only city I think that can rival us, and it's a good thing. But I get no break. I get to eat wherever I go. And then at the very end here, we have Ben Meek with Utilligent, and one of our senior executives, Felicia Etheridge, put us in contact with Utilligent, and Mike Bass, I think I saw him earlier, I might have missed him, they've been working on consultation and focus on smart city, and in particular, Ben has been focused on a project that's done a lot of work in Australia, Parramatta, Australia. And we have very much been able to benchmark and listen to the experiences that they've had. So we've got a wide range. And we've got the ability to talk about global, we got an ability to talk about regionalism, how to really kind of affect the city in a very special way. So these are the panelists for us today. And I'm gonna kick it off with a question to Clint. I actually would like you to talk about smart cities and how you think about the definition. You created something that's so simplistic, but it's broad. I don't want you to talk about that, and I'd like you to share with the audience the think tank and the concepts and how that has progressed.
Thank you, Paula. First of all, it's an honor to be on this panel with Paula and Jason and now Ben. Paula continues to win thought leadership awards about every 15 minutes. She has been named the top innovator by the industry a couple of weeks ago, and next week, in DC, the Women's Council on Energy and the Environment will give her Champion of the Year for 2019. And my dear friend Jason is the visionary for smart cities in New Orleans, and he created a standing committee of the council to deal with smart and sustainable cities. And Ben, I just look forward to learning from you, having come in. First of all, I want to learn about jet lag from Ben as he just flew in from Parramatta, Australia. The Denton Smart Cities think tank got formed really to, we have offices in about 170 locations in maybe 79 countries. And we wanted to learn from people around the world what their best practices were and have an opportunity to share information. It's actually no cost to the think tank, so if folks are interested, just send my co-chair of our global practice, Emma Hand, is here with me. Just send Emma or me an email and we'll get you involved. But first thing we discovered was when we started researching smart cities, and we're indifferent as to whether it's called a city of the future or smart cities. The mission is basically the same. We discovered that there was no universal definition. And so a smart city meant something different for a tech company than it meant for a telecom company or transportation or any of the other areas that are involved. And so we tried to develop a very simple definition that we felt would have broad applicability. And we drew this from clients and from people all over the world, from Singapore, and which was mentioned earlier, to Amsterdam and London and Shanghai and Beijing and Cape Town and really all over. And the definition that we basically came up with was all about modernizing the city. So a smart city modernizes the digital, physical, and social infrastructure of a city on an integrated basis that benefits all of your citizens. And it does this by harnessing sustainable technology in an equitable way. The word equitable, I saw in a lot of pieces of paper that were passed around in that earlier great workshop. Equitable really matters. We added that word because of New Orleans City Council President Jason Williams, who insisted on it. It covers way beyond the digital divide. The other thing we discovered is that, well, technology is zooming, and we agree that cities have been improving themselves for a couple of thousand years maybe, but the acceleration now of the technology is a game changer. And our sense is that the technology developments, the fourth revolution that people talk about with artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things and sensor technology and big data analytics, it's moving so fast that the social infrastructure hasn't really adapted and caught up. And that is an underappreciated fact, I think, and needs to be seriously addressed. We're behind on that, except this one here is a bridge builder. And so when we come to San Antonio, we're meeting with Cheryl Scully, who you heard from earlier, and the mayor and the leaders and heads of universities and board members. But that's not true everywhere. Jason is working on that in New Orleans, but it's a big deal to get everybody in the same room and then get members of the community integrated. So I'll stop there, Paula.
Okay, well, very good. Well, that's a good lead-in, very good lead-in. So, sir, councilman, and beyond, can you kind of share with the audience here what has been New Orleans' view and where are they at in the positioning and you know, kind of the immersion of smart cities for your community?
Sure. So when you think about a city that's 300 years old, you don't have to think very hard if you're in San Antonio. And if you talk to anybody that gets anywhere close to 100 years old, they'll start telling you about things that aren't working, whether it's a knee or a hip or vision, what have you. And the same thing applies to cities. You know, and the infrastructure, if you have not constantly been investing in infrastructure needs and foundational needs, then you will find yourself in a precarious situation of everything breaking at once, from the Sewage and Water Board to Public Works and on and on and on. And that's where we found ourselves out at 300 years. We had an aging infrastructure that really, you know, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know if there's any other electeds in the room, but when people get elected, they want to work on projects that can get completed during their term, right? They want to be able to cut a ribbon on something. So the idea of investing in something that may not come to fruition completely in 10 years or 20 years, you know, those sorts of things get pushed to the last on the to-do list. But they're so much more important in terms of catching up and being where you want to be. So after Katrina, we had tons of streets that had to be dug up because they were bad streets and they had lived a life and were now not drivable. because we had drainage pumps and pipes that needed to be repaired that had never been touched. So we came up with a dig once policy that would allow all departments and agencies to get inside of that hole while it was dug up so that we could lay fiber and lay conduit so that we could make sure that we were ready for 5G while we were dealing with our pipes, while we were dealing with our streets. And so a lot of that work was happening without the public even knowing that it was happening. But it's also important, as I've learned from you and Clint, to bring the public along the way so they get educated on this very specific, very technical stuff so that they realize that this inconvenience in their neighborhood is going to provide a level of connectivity that they've never had before, right? And we also live in a very poor city. We don't have a large middle class. We have a lot of people working in the service industry, but working 2 and 3 jobs so they can get by. But when you start talking about wayfinders, gunshot sensor technology, traffic control cameras, water sensor technology, all of these things affect them because when they call the police, they want the police to be able to show up. If 4 police could show up rather than 10 police because the gunshot sensor technology tells them exactly where to go, then it saves time, it saves resources. You don't have 5 cops on the scene at Jazz Fest or Mardi Gras directing traffic. Someone can do it from a desk, right? So these officers are more available. But the public needs to understand how all of that is connected. So we're engaged in a very real educational learning process where a 75-year-old woman understands it, whether she finished high school or not. And I guarantee you every child gets it. Just intuitively understands they want the 5G and they want to be able to hop on and they want that level of connectivity and they know when it doesn't exist for their games and for their classes. So we're trying to build a foundation in terms of public awareness and appreciation about why we're spending money on this, because it's going to take a lot of money, it's going to take a lot of time, but also building a foundation on our infrastructure to make sure that it is prepared to receive all the benefits that a smart city can deliver.
Okay, well, I would say we resemble that remark fully. Sir, let's talk about Parramatta. Do us a favor. I don't think we have a view. And we actually have slides clicking in the background, or I have a manual clicker. I think Loretta is actually helping me here. But we wanted to give you a sense from each one of our areas, and I think here's one for Parramatta. But could you tell us a bit about the community? Yeah. Tell us a bit about the work, and you've in many ways have really done a lot of these preliminary things that we're starting to venture into. So can you lay the foundation for that?
Thank you. Yeah, look, I guess pretty much everyone here will have heard of Sydney as a city. And Sydney, to define a city is different all around the world. Like there are up to about 40,000 cities in the United States with an average population of 8,000. So cities are small in the States, apart from obviously San Antonio and a few other notable ones. Australia itself, the entire population and economic output would fit into Texas. So we've got 25 million people in the country, you've got 28 here, similar GDP, and yet the country's as big as the whole of the US. Our cities are bigger, although we only got 600 of them. They've got about 40-something thousand people, but the biggest cities, obviously, I'm in a big city. The greater metropolitan area of Sydney is just under 5 million. So it's a big city in any world term. And the cities that collectively make up Sydney, Parramatta is right at the centre of that. We're the oldest inland city in the country. We're not as old as San Antonio. We were founded in 1788, so that is old in our part of the world. And as a city, we don't do all the things that cities do here. So we don't do policing, we don't do the EMT, we don't do schools. So those things are done by the state. So the shape of what we do and what we care for in our communities is a little bit different. We started our journey, people talk about the sort of stages of development of forming, storming, norming, and performing. And we're sort of at the storming stage now in Parramatta. We thought we did the right thing back in 2015, and we got a consultancy to help us figure out what a master plan would be. And we sort of had that done to us rather than doing it for ourselves and guiding it more ourselves. So that was a bit of a challenge. And 2 years later, 2017, our mayor of the city decided that we needed to do it for ourselves, and invited some people from industry, including myself, to form a Smart City Committee. So our Smart City Committee has only really been running, really technically, for about 18 months. And we realised that you've got to understand what your city is, and you've also got to understand exactly where you are in renewal of the things that make a city thrive. And I guess in our renewal, we'd sort of jumped down this sort of so-called digital path of the smart city thing, and we had 3 different ways to do your parking in our city. 3. We had 6 different digital platforms to engage with citizens. 6. And so we sort of had a lot of these sort of silos, and so in some respects, with the DeLorean out the front, we've sort of got to go back to the future. We've got to, and so forming the committee and really engaging out the chief information officer for the city wasn't part of our committee. And so I've gone, I'm off the committee, or that guy's on, because we're not going to do this without a teamwork, and we're not going to do it without everyone engaged. So those are some of the challenges that we've got as a city, but I think hopefully that gives you a little bit of perspective on Parramatta.
Well, okay, so good foundation. You can see that we have a wide range of experiences. I want to go back, though, and talk a little bit more about this data sharing thing, because we have been able to get some information and some guidance from Denton's and some of the collaboration on that side about things to watch out for. I harp on it again because making sure that the community thinks about trade-offs for information, where its boundaries are for what they want shared. And some people don't mind sharing depending on where it'll go or how it'll benefit them. But I don't know, Clint, can you share a couple of things about what things that you and your firm have actually looked at and things that have come through the think tank in terms of data sharing?
Sure. First of all, congratulations to this conference on having Fred Bonnewell and a robust discussion of cybersecurity and other types of data sharing. I'm not sure if we got to privacy. There might not have been time, but one of the pillars in our think tank is on these issues because they're so vital. If you look at not just data sharing, but if you look at Waterfront Toronto right now, where Google has been involved initially, there's a huge controversy over privacy. And in Canada, it's important to get perspectives from around the world. In Canada, privacy is a natural right of the citizens. And so I think a global company without maybe understanding the local culture and sensitivities to the degree that might have been helpful. Data sharing is changing pretty fast. My background is really started with energy and working with cities on grid modernization and things like that. We had to bring in our cyber and our data sharing teams and our telecom teams and our technology teams who have done an awful lot of this on a day-to-day basis. But it's really critical. I was glad to hear, maybe it was Felicia, talk about focusing on that issue here in San Antonio up front. Or I guess it was Cheryl Scully.
Yes, Cheryl.
And,
well, Felicia talks about it every time she can, but yeah.
But Cheryl was really on top of that concern, and it's got to get sorted out, and it's not subject to easy answers. So you have to get all the stakeholders in and get people with a lot of experience in data sharing and those type of agreements, and get them talking together.
Very good. Jason, could you keep going down the avenue of kind of talking about how difficult it is to make it simple for your entire community and keep them involved? What is really working in terms of getting everyone still dialoguing without the conversations really breaking down? And do you have any advice for communities? Because, again, I think the passions around what people believe in energy, technology, social activities is wide and firm, right? So how is New Orleans doing it?
So I'm going to steal and take it away from here, that phrase that Ben gave us: storming, norming.
Forming, storming, norming.
Forming, storming, norming. Because, it really speaks volumes to what you're going to be up against. Trust is probably the first foundational piece that you have to have moving forward. And it's probably the piece that I see skipped over the most. Ben was talking about they put together a master plan, right? But they didn't put together a master plan. Someone put together a master plan for them. Yeah. And people don't like things done to them, no matter how good it might be, right? They want to be asked. They want to be at the table. And when they're at the table, they're allowed to prioritize, because like you said, it's so vast. They're able to prioritize where to start. What would be most life-changing for citizens of New Orleans? Well, that's a big question, because what's life-changing for a citizen of the Lower Ninth Ward is very different from what's life-changing from a citizen of the French Quarter or the Lower Garden District. And so we've got to pull those folks in and make sure that we're listening to the city, so that when we start deploying things, the first things that are deployed have a real impact, so that there's an appetite for more. So that has been the struggle, is how you get everyone at the table. How do you explain what the real opportunities are to everyone in a way that they can digest them, and then begin to make these things the norm for folks so that they aren't scared of them. Data sharing scares a lot of people. Privacy issues scare a lot of people. And it's a generational piece. People under a certain age will give up all their information if they get something in return for it. Now, it might be streaming music or streaming video, whatever. But there's a quid pro quo that has to happen. And that quid pro quo has to exist for all those generations. So making sure you have electeds involved, the sharpest minds in terms of technology involved, and your old school infrastructure folks involved, so that when that street is open for those months and people are inconvenienced and dust is all over their homes and businesses, you have a list of things that are going to go in the ground so that people know why I've been inconvenienced and what I have to look forward to.
Interestingly, I think I heard a little, laugh along the way. And I think exactly what you said is kind of the complexity of the situation. Some people will give away their data for music rights. They don't have anything to do with each other. Yeah. So finding value propositions of what people think are worth it, we have to kind of change our linear thinking, right, to be more expansive thinking. So that I'm gonna keep that example, because I think that's very true. Maybe we can get musicians to give music away, and then we can create a smart city or something like that.
And then everybody will just see that long contract and accept it very quickly and move on.
And then the music there. Ben, you and I talked in the back a little bit, and you have an interesting situation. You started, and now you're restarting, so to speak, with a lot of ownership, right?
Yeah, look, part of our restart was that we realised we didn't really have one of the main foundations, or really, whatever the term is, smart city, future city, whatever, today connectivity and data are so fundamental to evolving places where people live and make them prosper. And to put that in context, globally, every day, there are about 3.5 billion Google searches. So that's a number, 3.5 billion. Mm. Every hour in our city of Parramatta, we produce more data points than that every hour. And so that's a lot of data, and you sort of got to work out, well, if we've got the data infrastructure in our city from last century, or maybe 2 centuries ago, how are we actually going to even share the data? Like putting aside privacy and like even technically, how would we get our heads around making data really available? Because, I mean, my undergraduate degree is data science, although we called it statistics back in the 80s. And I founded one of the largest public listed IT companies in Australia. So I've grown up in the data world. And we know that we cannot progress an agenda for future city without sort of what I tend to call a data engineering foundation. So that's where we start. We've got to have the core data infrastructure that puts data in the hands of people that have the insight. You know, it's one thing to have a sustainability department, but it's another thing to give them all the data that they need to actually start making insightful decisions about where you're going to go, predict things and understand where you want to go next. So I think that's sort of one of the things that we're really worrying about now and trying to address head on, but we're not really funded for it. I mean, the Mayor said we're implementing an open data policy, and I said, well, just hang on a minute, that's going to cost us a lot of money. We don't actually have the funding to implement an open data policy. So that's why we're storming at the moment, but we're working through it.
So the one thing I will add to this about it, everything sounds simple, right? Like let's prioritize and put more renewables in, or let's go and do data sharing. It really does take resource. You have to think about whether or not you're going to be in the cloud. If you're not going to be in the cloud, you have to think about who's going to be the custodian, what kind of security levels you need, how do you validate that? Then when you're sharing, who's your partner on the other side and what they're going to do. I have a very unpopular quote where I said, everything costs money. And the real thing is for a community to take inventory of everything it wants to do and start thinking about it. Because the one thing that doesn't cost money is ideas, right? But really when you try to effectuate those. So that's a great example. So we have a little bit of time left, and maybe I thought I would throw back at the question that I threw back at Cheryl, but you can take any one of the three options. So I'm going to go down the list, and relative to smart cities and how you look at how people are approaching it or how you're approaching it in your community. Pick either what you think communities should stop doing, what they better make sure continues, and I've tripped my own self up, continue doing. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll start with you.
I think the differentiator between cities that are really getting somewhere and others that are struggling is how to get to scale really fast, because the technology is coming so fast. And our premise, working with New Orleans and San Antonio and a number of other cities, is you've got to start by taking big, huge chunks of infrastructure that have to change anyway and that have a built-in funding source. So for example, grid modernization. For the last century, we've had a one-direction grid where the utility communicates to the customer. We're now moving to a multi-directional grid where not just the customer makes purchasing decisions, but their appliances will be doing that. So, and that's going to create tremendous benefits for customers, and there's a rate base to cover that. So we think part of the initial platform on a smart city, if you really want to get to scale fast, is grid modernization coupled with advanced telecommunications and connectivity, and then layer in other things that are also coming really fast, like mobility and autonomous vehicles are going to be here a lot quicker, I believe, than many people realize. Smart buildings. And there are so many things that you can lead into that without having to spend a huge amount of money. We're working with a trash collection company that calls their trash trucks now something like a mobile data platform, because they put sensors on it and cameras, and when the trash truck picks up trash, it's monitoring the street to immediately send information on potholes and other things that need to be addressed without having to have a separate costly function for that.
Well, very good. All right, Jason, you either want to stop it, continue, or start. Which one?
So I would say cities have to start with a master plan, but not just create it, but create it with real equity, with real input and participation, but figure out ways of institutionalizing the priorities of that plan. Because this is a 20-year piece. This is not a 4-year term piece. And so you've got to figure out a way for the public sector and the private sector alike to be in line and on one page on what the priorities are for year 1 and year 5 and moving forward. And part of that is using the data you have now and sharing that with the public. If you can create public-facing dashboards, we've been collecting crime data for years, recent years in the city, but we're just collecting it. But what we did more recently is the Smart and Sustainable Committee, we created a public-facing dashboard so you know what crimes were committed in your neighborhood, on your street, on your block, large and small, and when they were committed. So the public really knows how safe they really are, right? And so that's information that's digestible, it's accessible, and it sort of teases it up for more to come.
And just a laser question on that. How frequently do you think New Orleans is going to update that plan?
What, the master plan? Or
Is it the interval? Is it the interval? Is it at once a year, every few years?
I think if you can have something laid out, you'd have to do it every year. But understanding if you do it every year, then you're looking at very incremental change, right? If you do anything larger than that, then the people who are committed to those priorities are going to be up for re-election or term limited out. So you've got to figure out a way. Maybe it's creating a position of a person that is not elected, but will be there for the long haul. Because if you've got a traditional utility company, then they're going to slow walk a lot of this stuff because it's just not part of their profit model, right? And that's the thing we deal with. The public sector wanting to move very fast, but introduce saying, oh, we like these old wooden poles with termites and water damage. We don't want to use resin poles, you know. And so, AMI, SPAMI, we'll try a couple. We'll do a little pilot, you know. And then somebody else gets elected. It's like, oh, we had that pilot. We had 100 more homes to the pilot. And so you've got to have
incremental,
those real commitments,
right?
And those benchmarks, so that somebody feels like the heat's going to be on them if they aren't moving towards those things.
Very good. All right, Ben, you're going to pull up the rear here and kind of help us. You know, which one do you want to talk about?
Yeah, look, I think the thing that it's pretty easy to articulate the things you must do, you know. I mean, obviously, at San Antonio, you're big about listening. And so I agree with all of that. The thing that we've got to stop doing is playing silos, you know. It's all about, as a city, as a relatively small city, we can't do it all ourselves, and so it can't be done in silos, you know. And you know, even at every level in our organisation, you know, we have data in silos. You know, we've got SCADA data, we've got geospatial data, we've got citizen and rate-based data, we've got AMI data, we've got all this data, and it's all in silos. And one of the cool things that we're doing at the moment in Parramatta is we're implementing a Data Angels program. So what we've been doing is we've been encouraging data scientists and data engineers from industry to pro bono contribute to building a much greater level of data savviness in our city to encourage young people to take roles into data and really increase our capacity as a community to really sort of enable and really empower people with data, and you can't do that without skills. And so the Data Angels program is something that I think every city in the world should have a Data Angels program.
Data Angels.
They're doing it in LA, actually. LA City has got a Data Angels program, and they're doing a great job.
Well, the one thing I really like about Smart Cities, through the think tank and everything, you can take these ideas. So it would be awesome if the globe had data angels all over to help us solve issues. We went a little long, but I think we had a really good sense of the different great work that's happening around here. I very much want to thank you all for listening to us today. We are all working together to try to make things better. And so I would like to, if you would help me thank our panelists for sharing that today.